Hello, everybody, and welcome to Wisdom in the Room, special edition, special international edition. It's a huge privilege for me to welcome so many international experts back to the program. Experts who support this program and share their best advice. Regular people, leaders who are lifelong learners, teachers who've had spectacular careers. Tonight, it's our international guests. Thank you for tuning in. If you like this podcast, please follow us. Now I turn to the USA, to Tracy Hooper, who's in Portland, Oregon. Welcome, Tracy. Thanks for joining Monday Night Live. You've got some techniques for us.
I do have some techniques, and a thank you to Patricia Fripp, who introduced me to you about a year into Monday Night Live. I appreciate that. And now I have friends in the UK who I wouldn't have met if I hadn't known Patricia, who introduced me to you. So thank you for that. All right, so I'm a TV news reporter by training. I was a reporter and an anchor at several CBS affiliate stations on the East Coast of the United States. And Derek, you said we could have 5 minutes, but I can tell you as a news reporter, typically we would get a minute and a half to tell our story. And if we took a minute and 29 seconds, we were a hero. And if we took a minute and 31 seconds, we were a bum. So I'm going to take under 5 minutes to give my tips. I am, as we all are, because we all are in the business of speaking to one person or another, very curious about how culture affects our language. And our language is affected by many experiences, including our family culture, the culture we were born into, and also the popular culture. So today I want to talk about 3 what I call trendy words that we hear in our culture, and we want to fit in. Therefore, we tend to use those words. If we hear them, we repeat them because we want to feel like we fit into the culture, or more importantly, that we belong to a group. One of those trendy words is a hedge, and the word is pretty. I'm a pretty good speaker. I'm a pretty good writer. I have a pretty strategic mind. I'm pretty good at taking complicated information and simplifying it. What does that mean, pretty good? It's normal, and in fact, it tempers a statement to say the meeting went pretty well. It was a pretty hard project, but we got through it. Or the food was pretty good. That makes it more realistic. But when we say, I have a pretty strategic mind, what does that mean? We're not sure whether we do or not. And I will tell you, for all of these words, practice the power of pause. When you pause, it gives you a chance to focus on what you want to say. And it also gives the listener a chance to process what you have already said or what you're about to say. I have a pretty strategic mind, or I have a strategic mind. I'm pretty capable of taking complex information. I'm capable of taking complex information and simplifying it. It's a small but significant gesture that makes a difference. The second trendy word is, and I call this a hot hedge, the word is a little. So raise your hand if you hear people saying, today I'd like to talk a little bit about, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. Here's a little pushback. We're a little behind schedule. As one of my clients said to her team, we're not a little behind schedule. We are 2 weeks behind schedule. Let's say it like it is. And here is my number 1 pet peeve around the a little category. Would you mind if I gave you a little feedback? What does a little feedback mean? When you say a little feedback, does that mean that it's so small that you don't have to worry about it? I'll tell you anyway, because I think you ought to know, but it's a little feedback. Or if you say, would you be open to a little feedback? That sounds as if if you make it diminished, that it won't hurt your feelings so much. And we all know that feedback delivered well is a gift. It is stronger to say, would you be open to some feedback about the meeting this morning, as opposed to a little feedback? I'd like to provide a little background about myself. Here's some background about me. I have a little pushback. I'd like to push back here. Practice the power of pause. And the way we'll know whether we use these hedges, for instance, these trendy words, is to record ourselves. If you're on a Zoom call, you may even listen to the Zoom call afterwards. And if you raised your hand and you had something to say, you might notice that you use some of these trendy words. And the final word I'll use is right. How often have you been in a conversation where people habitually say right? It's the equivalent of the Canadian eh, or when the French say n'est-ce pas? Correct, is it not? If you haven't heard it, believe me, it's coming to a conversation near you. 2 weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C., giving a presentation to a group of middle to senior level managers at a large organization. It was around conflict in conversations, and I was the last one to speak. And there's good and bad about that. The bad is it makes you nervous. You have all day to prepare because you're the last person on the agenda. But the good news is you get some feedback about what other people are saying that you could use in your own information. It was sponsored by the Learning and Development Department of this organization. And the person who spoke most, the person who was leading the workshop, said right 105 times. It was shocking. And I was embarrassed for her. No one has ever told her that this is the way it went. Leadership is challenging these days, right? Because we all come from different backgrounds, right? And different experiences over the years, right? It's difficult to lead in this day and age, right? I was without words, and I of course couldn't say anything to her because we're not colleagues. She hired me to give this presentation at the end. But I want you to be aware of those words that we use, that we hear in popular culture, that we don't know how we sound because we typically don't record ourselves. And if you practice the power of pause, you can lose those hedges such as pretty and a little, and right, which is a filler, it's an extra word, it's a hedge. You don't want to come on too strong, so we hedge. And it's also a validator. You're looking for all kinds of validation from the audience or from the other person. Therefore, I encourage you to practice the power of pause. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. That was fantastic. Very, very good indeed. How long did she speak for with 105 rights?
Well, the meeting started at 9 a.m. and she spoke off and on until I presented at 1:30.
Wow. And you were counting her rights.
I started not to count, but it was so obvious that I thought, and have you ever heard a person on stage and they use the word and you get so distracted by that, you end up doing your head, 1, 2, 3, mark, 1, 2, 3, and then you don't even listen to the content.
It's interesting that she was paying you, so you couldn't give her any feed forward, as I call it. That was brilliant.
Yes.
Well, you did mention France, and we're going to John Timms next, who's just outside Paris. John, are you there? And are you unmuted?
Yes, I'm now unmuted, and thank you very much, Derek. If in Oregon, between 1 minute 29 seconds, you're a hero, and at 1 minute 31 seconds, you made a real mess of things. If I were to compare this with the French situation, if you did it in 1 minute 29 seconds, everyone will be swooned out saying, hey, what's wrong with him? Why doesn't he talk much more, or whatever? If you went on beyond 1 minute 31, they'd say, yeah, sounds good, keep going. When you get to 2 minutes 30 seconds, then you're beginning to hit the nail on the head. And probably if you could get through to 3 minutes 30 seconds or even 5 minutes, then you might be considered as a hero. And so the comparison between Oregon and France, from a cultural standpoint, is extremely interesting. And the French language is full of what I call adverbial expressions, equivalent of right, a little, etc., etc. So in French, it's probably a bit easier than in English to use those words. Now, I'm limited to 5 minutes. I've already spoken for a bit over. I've taken your list, Derek, and I'll answer in the following way. I'll start with your best piece of advice. And my best piece of advice for everybody is carpe diem.
Mm.
Carpe diem. And to please, Tracy, right? Second point. I've jumped these things. I couldn't find 3 tips from a favorite book. I couldn't think of anything great. Maybe it will come to me as I'm speaking, if I can stick to the 5 minutes. Second was a lesson learned from a mentor. And I would say this from personal experience when I was in a PhD student, very short of money, told by my supervisor that I needed an extra 3 months to finish my PhD, otherwise he wouldn't support me. So I had to go to the professor of the faculty, who was Professor Alexander Todd, Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, 1950, whatever. And I went to him, cap in hand, feeling very shy, timid, not in a good frame of mind, penniless, certainly, to ask for some money for 3 extra months. And he listened to me, and he said, okay, how much do you want? And at that time, for 3 months, I needed £150. Sounds not too much today, but in those days, it was an enormous amount of money. So I said, yeah, I know your problem, and I know the trouble you're having with your supervisor. He's not an easy character. Okay. He pulls out a checkbook and he writes me a check for £150. So my conclusion from this is be generous, particularly if they're dealing with a situation requires merit. Okay, I'm not saying I was full of merit. I'm not saying that in any way, but just be generous when you're faced with a demand where there is a, okay? Now, the next one I've got, I'm looking at my paper here to make sure I get this right. A personal technique that works time and time again. Just keep mum when things become difficult. Learn how to keep your mouth shut, but tweak your ears. Next question, next point. And this is a gem of wisdom passed down from parents. And incidentally, Derek, congratulations on the ideas you came up with. Very thought-provoking and very interesting. This came from my father and just basically said, always remember, you're not the only grain of sand on the beach. Now, I know this is, I could see Derek smiling. But I recently learned that Derek comes from we were born only a few miles away from each other, although we didn't know this at the time. And so I think we speak the same language to a certain extent. I like that.
Now, you got one more, John. Only one more left.
Okay, here we go. Short, powerful, wise expression. And I'm quoting John Fitzgerald Kennedy, which, let me paraphrase it. Don't ask what the person facing you can do for you. Ask what you can do for the person facing yourself. And this is very important in negotiation because it raises the power of raising questions. Asking somebody, what do they really want from a negotiation so that you have the power of leverage? Upon which I stop. I hope I'm within the 5 minutes. Cheers. Yes. Okay.
Merci.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. Merci bien, monsieur. And I also looked up where you live, John, and I see that's a very classy suburb of Paris, where in the World War II books I'm reading at the moment, the Nazis hung out because it was a classy place. But perhaps
yes, it's a very highly residential. It's also part of one of the 5 royal cities surrounding Paris.
Fantastic.
Very few people don't realize how many royal cities are around Paris, and there are 3 royal palaces in Paris. And the reason why the Germans liked Saint-Germain, and they built a horrible bunker house right in the middle behind the famous chateau built by Francis I in 15 whatever. They built it next door. And it's still there because nobody can knock it down, because if they were to try to knock it down, it would probably knock down the chateau at the same time.
Thanks, John. Maybe we have a Monday Night Live in Paris one day. That would be lovely, wouldn't it?
Oh, you're most welcome.
Now we need to go probably about 5,600 miles to California, to San Francisco, to Patricia Fripp. Are you there, Patricia? And are you unmuted?
I am here, alive, well, and enjoying listening to your other guests.
Fantastic. So what tips and techniques have you got for us today?
One, the power of vacations. And thank you, Godfrey and Derek, for making the first part of my trip spectacular. Also know, if Derek is picking you up from the airport, even if you have flown internationally, you will be whisked away in your travel clothes with no sleep to deliver an hour-and-a-half presentation to his mastermind group, which was a lot of fun, and I felt great. That was not a problem. Two, I'd like to pick up on what Tracy said about pretty, a little, and right. I have my own words I recommend people remove, and we do not know what we are saying. And so often, my number one is, if it weren't a thing, what would it be? And if you want to get these words out of your vocabulary, you must give the people around you who love you the most permission to help you. So you say to your direct reports or your team members or your spouse and children, I need your help. I am doing my best to remove these words from my everyday conversation. When you hear me, just say, if it wasn't pretty, what would it be? Or don't you need the word? Or if it weren't a thing, what would it be? And then, of course, if you're in meetings, record just to listen to your side of the conversation, because you are not aware what you do, and you will not improve what you're not aware of. Next, it is not your client and prospect's job to remember you. It is your obligation and responsibility. Now, that is a long time old frippicism I've been using for years. However, it is very true. I recently booked a speaking engagement for Hawaii, which I, of course, will turn into a mini vacation, then go stay with friends in Kona after 5 days in Honolulu. This originally came from the big boss from Kaiser Hawaii, who booked me probably 16 years ago when she was in another company long before she went to Kaiser and Hawaii. So keep in touch. This is why even getting people on the newsletter, or however you communicate, connect them on LinkedIn, and be ongoing, consistent, and relentless with your promotions. Now, I have been writing blog posts since 2009 and sending out weekly email newsletters even longer than that. And my next tip is, when you are looking for ideas, I'll go to my blogs, and I can go to the 2009, either delete them, improve them, or be inspired by them. For example, in old blog posts, I found 2 quotes that I am now each one turning into updated, modernized content. One was, Lee Strasberg said, actors have to be actors have to be private in public. I think that's, let me look, it's in other words, you're making it look natural. So I'll take that quote, put into ChatGPT, of course, and say, give me, put this into context. In other words, people who don't know who Lee Strasberg is, he has to be personal in public. That's it. You have to be personal in public. And give me a few quotes from actors that worked with him, and going to the blog post on fripp.com, add how this relates to speakers. So you're pulling out old ideas, even and revisiting what you wrote before. Another one is when I went to hear Bud Friedman speak. He was the founder of the improv comedy clubs. And I asked him in the Q&A, and I tell you, you get great content when you ask experts interesting and not normal questions in their presentations. This has served me very well. And if you came to the Golden Gate Breakfast Club meetings, very often people would say, oh, no one ever asked me that before. Or that's a great question. Because you don't want to be a boring audience member. Anyway, I said to Bud Friedman, is there such a thing as natural talent? He said, yes. However, there is no overnight success. Jay Leno had natural talent. However, it took him at least 15 years to really be established. So I take that, and again, research in ChatGPT the timeline of Jay Leno's career, and it took him actually nearly 20 years before he was on before he got the Tonight Show. And I remember Bud Friedman said, because it said here he used to drive to New York from Boston, sleep in his car just to be able to do 5 minutes. And Bud Friedman in the presentation said, I put him on stage because he drove so far consistently to try and get on stage. So then you relate that. So is my time up, Derek? Okay, zip. I have another one for next time.
Your time's up, Patricia, but don't worry, I'll be asking you back. And by the way, when you get off the plane at Heathrow, you never know what's going to happen. So Tracy Hooper must be worried about this on the 4th of August when I pick her up. But there we are. That's fantastic. And we're talking about learning and lifelong learners. And you saw the picture in my newsletter of Patricia and Max Twinham. Max has set me up a TikTok channel, and we've had 200,000 views in 10 days. I don't know anything about TikTok, but somehow he's got 200,000 views. So Patricia, you probably need to talk to Max with me, but he's on the beach in the moment in Greece. Thanks, Patricia. That was fantastic. Now we go almost to Greece, to Albania, to Tony Woodall. Tony, if you're muted, can you unmute yourself? And welcome to Monday Night Live.
Thank you, Derek. I'm going to set my timer here so I don't forget. I was going to talk to you about, never mind. You can keep it. I was going to talk to you about techniques to control and calm the mind of those of you who wake up in the middle of the night with your brain going a million miles a minute. However, Colin died. One of our expat friends, Colin, who's from the UK, last week passed away. Now, the sad thing is, Colin, like me, is a solo traveler living in Albania, here in Doris, and he was found laying on the side of the road dead. Tragic to find out. One of our friends somehow was notified, and he called me, do you know where Colin lived? No, I have no idea. I've talked to Colin, had drinks with Colin, and sang at the karaoke nights with Colin, but I had no clue where Colin lived. It took the police 3 days to find out who Colin was, where Colin lived, again, because he was laying out in the street. And, one of the things some friends of ours got together and really are thinking about is if you are a solo traveler, if you know solo travelers, especially, male or female, either one, but if they're alone, living by themselves, or traveling by themselves, tell them that they need to communicate with family, friends, somebody close to them, let them know where they're staying, how to get in touch with them, or, people around them. It's very important to do that. And the other thing is also pay attention to your body. Make sure that you aren't, I know men are commonly stubborn about going to the doctors, doing things. Turns out Colin had actually been talking to one of our expats here who's also from, he's from Albania, but he and his wife is from the UK. But they, had been communicating with Colin for like 3 or 4 days. Colin felt like he had something wrong. He couldn't come to the club that we go to, the bar. He wasn't feeling well. He thought he had a upper respiratory or something with his breathing. And he would say, "Oh, you need help? Anything that we can do to help you?" And he said, "No, I'm fine. Couple just work through it. I'll be better in a couple of days, and I'll let you know." And he finally, guy texted with him a couple of days later, said, "Colin, are you doing okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just not feeling well, just kind of stomach things or whatever." And next thing you know, like I said, they found Colin dead on the side of the road. And by looking at his the videos from the locations and hotels and things around, they saw him actually clasping his chest and falling down a couple of times, and finally the last time. So what I want to do is a public service announcement. If you know people that are solo travelers, if you know somebody, men especially, because we're very stubborn about going to the doctors, follow up with them, make sure that if they've mentioned they're ill, that they do go to the doctor or whatever. It's important that we keep in touch, find out where they're living. The bar owners are now starting a database of expats that live here, if we want to, but have them leave that information of where they're living with somebody that they know, somebody that they trust, so that people can find out, where they are. And again, keep in touch in case they do need help. Again, I'm guilty of it. There are days I'll go without talking to anybody. So make sure that if somebody's not communicating with you, at least periodically, if you're used to them showing up and they don't, make sure you reach out to them. So share that information with those around you. I was visiting Pogradec, Albania, which you can see in the background here on the North Macedonia border. You're looking at North Macedonia there. I had a Guinness with Colin. He had already left us, but we shared a Guinness in remembrance of Colin. So that's really what I want to say today. I can save my other information for another time, but pay attention to those who are solo travelers. If you have people that are expats alone, please make sure that you keep in touch with them.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah. Thanks, Tony. Maybe you should set up a mastermind group at one of these bars, a Monday Night Live mastermind group. Make it Tuesday night, though. Could you?
Yeah.
We like having you on. I'm going to Nancy Lotes Taylor now. Nancy, if you're there and you can unmute, that would be fantastic.
Mute.
Yes, you are. Brilliant.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, yes. Thank you.
Can you hear me all right? Well, I'm going to change the direction of our discourse tonight a little bit, because Derek in his instructions, as John Timms reminded us, said, some points from a book or whatever. And so I have an author that I've been following for a number of years, whose work I think is tremendous, because I first started following her when she was working on women in leadership back before the COVID, back before the pandemic. And so she's sort of shifted from she still does the gender stuff, women in leadership and all, but she sort of shifted as she went through a life change, which we're all going through. And she's come up with an approach and a concept that I wanted to share with you today because I think it's relevant to all of us. Anybody here over 70? Hands up.
No, 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 no.
Yeah, anybody here over 80? Hands up. Yeah, there's a few people. Yes, I know. And anyway, what she's come up with is this concept, and I want to share a slide deck with you. Only 6 slides, just to put it visual. I like to deal in the visual. So can I share, Derek? Am I allowed to share?
You are allowed to share, yeah. Go on, share. You
Okay.
should be able to share.
Nope, says sharing's not allowed.
I've just made you a
Now
co-host.
it is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, let me get up yeah, here we are. This one, share that one. Yeah. So the 4-quarter lives is what it's called, what she's come up with. And her name is Aviva Wittenberg Cox. And she is a global thought leader on gender and generational balance. Now, the interesting thing about that generational balance is thinking about the fact that when I was a kid, and when all of you were children, probably, somebody that was retired was somebody that was old at 50 or 55 and, putting their feet up, watching the telly and gone by 60 or 65. Well, how many of you have parents or relations that are in their 90s now? I do. My Aunt Shirley is 91. And my Aunt Nancy, oh yes, they had to keep the name in the family, didn't they? My Aunt Nancy is 96, and she's still sharp as a tack. So the point being that we've got 4-quarter lives is what she's come up with, and essentially use that kind of language because quarter 1, quarter 2 is the short-term thinking. Let's think about a little bit of longer-term thinking, and putting it in 25-year units. And so we spend the first 25 years growing and getting our qualifications and our education and learning about life. Next 25 is achieving, then becoming, and then harvesting is what her language is around it. And I find it fascinating for a number of reasons, but I'll just go through these quickly till we get to the Q3, which I think is a really interesting one. Okay, so yes, we need that support in the growth phase of our family, the community units, the school, the sports clubs, the church or religious community, whatever it is. So we grow physically, relationally, and intellectually. Then we go into quarter 2, which is ages 25 to 49, which is, yes, building work and experience and focusing on career and professions and getting those professional and personal achievements, building families. Now, the interesting thing is her work on gender and the work on generations sort of come across each other here because she talks about the fact that women many times have to take time out in Q2 to have children, to raise them, and then go back into the workforce. And this is where she's saying Q3, which is where we are becoming, we have a longer life. So most of us here perhaps are going to last until we're 80s or 90s, or even some of you maybe into, hitting the big century, 100, who knows? But the point being is we have longer lives now and we're healthier longer. And so basically people are healthy and active into their 70s and 80s. Now, the oldest person I know that's still working that I personally know is Herb, who lives in San Diego. And he's the father of a friend of mine, and he's 86 and he still works. He doesn't work a 5-day week, he works a 3-day week. And he's still he's an engineer and he's very lively, still very, adds lots of value to his company, etc. So it's basically recognizing that our lives have changed and shifted as we have developed in the last, 40 years, 50 years, better healthcare systems and supposedly better food. We won't go there for that one just now. But basically, people when they hit their 50s to 74 time period, that Q3, people are healthy and active and want to keep going, but perhaps in a different way. Okay, and one of my points here about Q3 is, and I'm trying to get my cursor, there we go, come over here, is the question is, do employers get it? Okay, because what is going on, and you've seen it over COVID in the States, lots of people were made redundant, particularly the more senior aged employees. Likewise in the UK, I don't know in the other countries around the world perhaps experience that as well. But these people are still able, got lots of wisdom, just like we share here on Monday Night Live, but do the employers get it? And are leaders taking this group into consideration? So this lady, Aviva Wittenberg Cox, has started her own longevity leadership challenge program at the Catholic University in Portugal to really focus on this, because it is with the fact that we've got less young people coming on, we need to keep those of us that are in Q3 employed for longer. And then, of course, we come to Q4, which is the harvesting. And basically, we need to review create our own view of what she calls aspirational aging. What can we be doing? And it's absolutely fascinating when you get to thinking about it. And I'm just going to focus on two actors, okay? Tom Hanks, everybody knows who he is, yes. He was on the Graham Norton show a few years ago, and he did a piece on Graham Norton, being the direct guy that he is, says, "So are you retiring now, Tom? You're 66." And Tom goes, "No, I went to an aging specialist, and he said I shouldn't give up working. I should just change the way I'm working." And so that's the thing that you must see when you see some of the more senior actors like Judi Dench, who is now 90. So they can keep going. And so how do we avoid the dreaded R word, which I basically talk about people. I use my energy and my vitality in different ways, but I don't like the word retirement. Is that enough, Derek?
Enough, Nancy. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I use the word retirement as retired, spelt R-E-T-Y-R-E. I just get myself a new set of tires, and away we go. Formula
There we
One.
go. I like
Lando
it.
Norris, no problem at all. Thanks very much. Now, this is the sexy bit where we go over to Hawaii. Are you there, Carl Walsh? And can you unmute?
I am here.
And the only reason
And
if
we get the screen back, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. So only reason I said sexy is because I fancy going to Hawaii, and you've always got a flashy shirt on, Carl.
There we go.
Welcome.
Well, this leads into my little bit of wisdom. And there's a phrase I keep coming back to in my life, and that is to be the fool to become the master. Now think about it. Every single master you've ever admired, whether it's a great actor, an athlete, a leader, they all started out looking like complete fools. They stumbled over their lines, they fell flat in practice, they made awkward mistakes in front of people, like me wearing this shirt today, or me having lunch with people visiting here at the beach for the last 2 days. But they didn't stop with their mistakes. They leaned into the discomfort. They kept going until the awkwardness turned into skill and then into mastery. They embraced the mistake, like the people who made mistakes and gave us Post-it notes, microwave ovens, penicillin, X-rays, and yes, the most important mistake of all, potato chips. Now, sometimes your mistakes turn out to be unexpected genius. Some of the best directions I ever gave as a director in theater was keeping mistakes that we made in rehearsal. They were some of the best things we ever came across. Sometimes they just turn out to be unexpected genius. But most people never get there because they're terrified of that first stage. They'd rather avoid the risk of embarrassment than push through to excellence. Monty Python called it growing up and being British. But really, it's being human. And I can tell you from my own journey in theater and business, there is no shortcut. You will feel clumsy. You will make mistakes. And that's not a sign that you're failing. That's looking at new problems through new eyes. People make a big deal about imposter syndrome today. Oh, get over it. It's just a way for psychiatrists to book more hours. That feeling, that anxiety is the price of admission. It is the price of admission to mastery. Whenever I got promoted and I got a new job, yes, I felt nervous. I wondered if I could do it, but that's just a sign you're in the arena. I've seen many actors, me included, try to start out with a finished product. Most likely, it's a poor imitation of someone else. And that is precisely what you get. A mediocre, half-baked, shallow final product because you didn't risk finding your own solutions. The same in business, the same in life. Mediocre, half-baked, shallow imitations of someone else. So here's my invitation to you. Whatever mountain you're climbing, on stage, in business, or in life, be willing to look foolish. Be willing to take imperfect action. Embrace the mistake. It means you're exploring, learning, expanding. And the faster you embrace being the fool, the sooner you get to become the master. Back to you, Derek.
Oh, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. You reminded me of Paul McCartney's song, Fall on the Hill, which is one of my favorite ones.
There you go.
Well, we're nearly out of time, but I decided that perhaps I ought to come up with 3 of my tips and techniques. Number 1, focus on what's important. So many people focus on things that aren't important. Apply the 80-20 rule, Pareto's rule, and just look at what you're doing. Examine what you're doing every day. Make a list, cross off the things that aren't important. Number 2, and I've always mentioned this, keep learning. When you're learning, you're earning respect from other people. Just look at Patricia and I touring Dorset, and then we've got a 23-year-old who's correcting us and telling us all the things that we don't understand. And I came across this quote from Robert Heinlein, and I don't know if you know who Robert Heinlein is. I looked him up. He was an actor, and he said, keep teaching and keep mentoring, because it not only helps others, it helps you. You learn more when you teach. So thanks to my guests, fantastic group of people. Thanks for joining Monday Night Live. If you're enjoying this on YouTube or on my podcast programs, please like it, please follow me and look at some of the other fantastic guests I've had on. So thanks to the guests again, and can I give everyone a round of applause in the normal Monday Night Live way. Thank you so much.